Are you ready for a winter power outage? If the answer is no, don't worry, because today we're going to talk about 6 strategies you can use to get ready for any emergency situation. So you may be asking yourself, why do I need to worry about a winter power outage? Well, according to the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, 2/3 of Americans are going to lose power this year. The first step of preparing for any power outage is just to think about light. It sounds silly, but we are so used to walking into rooms and flipping light switches and having light no matter what we're doing. And in a power outage situation, it can be really disconcerting if we don't have a light source available. The easiest, simplest way is just to get some flashlights or some lanterns, anything that you can use to provide a light source. Once we have light taken care of, the second thing that we want to think about is just water. And we have talked about water before, so you know that you need a lot of water to sustain you. And the reason we worry about that in power outage scenarios is sometimes our pipes can freeze, and that may disrupt the water flow into your home, which can impact your sanitation and also just drinking water. One of the great things that we have found for water storage is called a water bob. This is basically a water bladder that you can put in any standard tub, and it holds up to 100 gallons of fresh water. The reason I love these is because this water can provide you safe drinking water and water for both cleaning and cooking, which is great if you're in an extended power outage situation where maybe you don't have access to clean water. These are relatively inexpensive and they can be used at any time. One thing to note about these water bobs though is they are single use, and that means that if you're really going to use it to drink out of, you only want to fill it up once. There is some concern that if you fill it up and then drain it, that water and bacteria can be left behind, and so it's not something that you're going to want to refill all the time. We really keep these for significant emergency situations where we're concerned that it may be days or weeks without water. So once we have water taken care of, the third thing that we want to think about is just food. What you're going to read in most emergency kind of preparedness things is just to store shelf-stable food. Those are foods that you can eat straight off the shelf without having to worry about cooking them. And there is definitely in value in having some of that kind of food available on your shelves. But I want to dig in a little bit deeper. If you are like me and you love food, you're probably not going to just want to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches off your shelf or dry cereal. You're going to want to have food that feels comforting, particularly in a power outage situation in the winter where it's cold. I don't know about you, but I want warm food. I want things like soup and oatmeal and things that really stick to your bones and kind of have that comfort effect. And so the 2 things I want to talk about today are just a Eureka camp stove. It's called a Spark. This is just a single burner butane stove that we can put any sort of pan on and cook. This is great. I can boil water. I can make macaroni and cheese. I can heat up soup. I've done stir fry in this before. I can cook almost anything on this 1 burner stove that I could cook on my normal kitchen stove. The one thing just to be mindful of is obviously if you're using any kind of propane or butane, you want to make sure that you have good ventilation. Most places recommend that you don't use this inside. Another option to look at from a camping perspective is just these MSR or JetBoil stoves. These are super popular here in Colorado for backpackers and hikers. They're just a great way to heat up water very quickly. So I use these for things like oatmeal, for freeze-dried food, and also for making coffee in the morning, because mornings without coffee around here are a little bit dangerous. These are a great addition to your preparedness supplies. I also keep one of these in my emergency car kit, and this is how I plan on kind of feeding myself if I am stuck in my car for any length of time. So another video on that some other time, but I really love these stoves as another alternative if you're not going to go something like a butane or propane single burner stove. So in addition to those kinds of things that you want to think about, I also recommend storing just a few dehydrated meals. Think of dehydrated or freeze-dried meals as your fast food option for cooking when you're in an emergency situation. One thing to pay attention to is usually on the servings in the back, this will say that it serves 2, but if you look at the calorie count, normally you're going to want to double whatever their portion size is to make sure that you're getting enough calories if you're just trying to survive off freeze-dried meals. So just know that if you're storing them. And again, if you're storing freeze-dried meals, just recognize there's going to be an additional water requirement that you have to be able to make these. So make sure you're calculating that in if you're using freeze-dried meals as part of your food storage options. All right, so you have light, you have water, you have food. Now you're going to think about warmth. So when we think about staying warm in winter storm conditions where there's a power outage, we're going to think about things like layering our clothes, keeping our core temperature warm, things, piling up jackets and warm socks. Those are super important things to make sure that you have on hand. If you're in an area like where it doesn't get cold a lot, like Florida, you may not have thought through some of these things. I used to live in Florida, and I will tell you that my winter gear looked very different when I lived there than when I live here in Colorado. So make sure that if you live somewhere where maybe the outdoor temperatures don't always get that cold and you're not used to bundling up, that you have at least a few things kind of in reserve. You don't need to go out and splurge on the most expensive stuff. Just buy a couple key pieces to keep you warm, whether that is long johns or a few layers. Vests are great to keep your core temperature warm. I think my favorite thing to talk about from a heating your home scenario is just a Mr. Buddy space heater. These are really efficient propane heaters that run off a little 1-pound bottle. You can also buy an adapter for them where they can run off one of the larger propane tanks that you use on your grill. These are great for warming up a small space. We use these in our travel trailer when we travel. Now, again, there's safety concerns with using propane inside. I am going to drop a link below to a YouTube video that we found that talks about how cleanly these burn propane. You are going to want to have a carbon monoxide detector if you are using one of these in your home to make sure that you are monitoring any dangers that are coming from heating your house. Again, people die every year from using propane heaters in their house, so just make sure that you're paying attention to the safety concerns. All right, so you're warm, you're fed, you have water, you're feeling pretty good. The next thing you're gonna wanna think about is step 5, and that is just staying connected. Most of us are very familiar with the fact that we use our phones nonstop to stay connected to the people that we care about and to get news. When we talk about staying connected, there's sort of 2 key parts. The first one is staying connected to what's going on outside, and for that, I would really recommend an emergency radio. If you haven't checked it out, go check out the 72-hour emergency kit. It talks all about the radios and things that you might need in an emergency situation. That's a good first step. The second step is just thinking about how you're going to keep your electronics powered, because the reality is we are a very connected world, and staying in touch with the people around us and outside of where we are can be very comforting in an emergency situation. The easiest way is just to buy one of these power banks. You probably have one of these if you travel very much for work. It's just a backup battery bank that you can use to charge your phone. Now, if you have one of these, you need to get into a routine of keeping it charged. So whatever that cycle is for you, whether that's bringing it out once a month, charging it, checking it. If you travel a lot, you're probably already charging it, but you just want to make sure that you have a routine for charging it, because again, in a power outage scenario, if this isn't charged, it's not going to do you much good. That brings us to our second option, which is just a solar charger. We really like these because you can put them on windowsills, you can stick them right outside of your house, and they charge really well. They can keep phones and small electronics powered pretty well as long as you're not in a completely dark scenario. Again, we're at a little bit of an advantage here in Colorado because it's sunny all of the time, even when it storms. But having a few solar chargers are a great addition to have. These also work in vehicles, so if you stick them up in your dash, they will charge while you're driving, or if you're just stuck in a vehicle, these will charge in your vehicle, and then you can use them to keep devices powered. As of a note, just make sure that you somehow keep all of your cords and cables connected. We like to put a little piece of 550 cord on them and then just a carabiner so that we can hang them places. And then we tie our little cord to it with either a zip tie or a twisty, just some way to make sure that your cords stay with us, because again, once you lose the cords for this and you can't charge it or you don't have a way to connect it to your phone, they are not quite as useful as you would think. The last thing we're going to talk about for staying connected is just a solar powered generator. We love solar powered generators. We're a big fan of solar power. We use it a lot. Jackery is the brand that we really recommend, and I'll do another video sometime on all of our Jackery sources, but this is just a small one that we would use in the event of a small power outage to keep all of our electronics and devices connected, and this would just be a way to make sure that we kept everything charged. They're also useful for running electric blankets. So if you are in a really cold situation and you have one of these that's a little bit larger, you can run an electric blanket off of them. Again, if you do it intermittently, these things will hold their charge for a good 24 hours. We've run an electric blanket when we've camped off of this one for overnight, 2 nights in a row with no problem. And that's just another option to help you stay warm in a power out situation. Having one of these little Jackeries, you can run quite a bit of stuff off of them. All right, and number 6, the last thing that you want to think about in a power outage is how to stay entertained. I know I mentioned this on a couple other videos, but really thinking about your mental health and what you are going to do to stay connected. Just having some games, some cards, board games, things that your family enjoys doing can go a long way in making a situation that's not very fun a little bit more enjoyable. So store your favorite board games, store your favorite puzzles, arts and crafts, things like that. Just have a way to think about entertaining yourself and your children so that you have a little bit more fun in a power outage scenario. Who knows, maybe it will become like a mini family vacation. So that's it. Those are the 6 things that you can do to help you survive any sort of power outage, particularly in the winter where you want to stay warm and well fed and comfortable with coffee. And don't forget the chocolate. All right, and I want you to do me a favor. Just drop a comment below. Tell me your favorite way to stay entertained during a power outage. And let's just remember, keep it clean. My mom watches these videos. If this content was useful and you found out about a few products that you're interested in, I would love it if you just hit subscribe or hit like so you never miss a video. I try to publish content every week, and I would love to hear the questions that you have for surviving a power outage or getting more prepared in general. Until next time, let's stay prepared, not scared.